Good evening, everyone. Time is 6 p.m. It's Monday, June 3rd, 2024. We're going to call to order our work session. Today's work session is a work session to discuss the options for the final phase of the bike path, as well as the best use of funds being held by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation for the project. So just a little background on this. We had a town council meeting May 20th, 2024, and we had Dupree Engineering, Beta Engineering, and Prairie Engineering who presented the bike path study. It included alternative options for the final phase of the bike path, which is 4B. And then this work session, again, is to discuss the options that were presented and how to utilize the $3 million that's earmarked by the Department of Transportation for this project. So I am just going to open it up. If any council members have any feedback or input from what we heard at the last council meeting, I'll open it up to the council members first. And I know Councilor Kopech reached out and said she had some thoughts on the presentation.
I do, thank you. First, just to, I don't know how many people have actually seen the bike path study. There were 3 alternate options that were given. In all of them, they started out at the same place at the terminus of the bike path currently, and they came up along the side of the large baseball field up to Kingstown Road, and then there was going to be a dedicated 2-way lane going in what is now a parking area all the way down to Narragansett Avenue. The first, and that's all 3 of them go that way for the beginning. And then the first alternate actually took the path. You probably can't see that, but if, and I don't think I can make it any bigger, but I'm sure you all know where Narragansett Avenue is. So Narragansett Avenue, it goes all the way down Narragansett Avenue on the north side where the parking would be removed. And again, a dedicated 2-way bike lane would be in that space. It would come down to Caswell Avenue, which is the cross down at the right-hand corner of the map there, and then it would turn and terminate at the light on Boston Neck Road. It included the removal of, I believe it was 87 parking spaces, and it also requires people who live on the north side of that road to figure out how to get out of their driveways. There's several houses there. So, and that was their recommendation, and it was the most expensive one, although it didn't come anywhere near $3 million. But I think it has some real problems. There's definitely traffic issues. I think there's some safety issues. There's certainly a lot of difficulty for the people who live there, and it's not scenic. So unless you really like looking at everybody else's houses. So that was, I didn't love that option. The other 2 options are really not feasible. One goes down to that same corner at Narragansett Avenue, and it turns right on it stays on Kingstown Road, basically, which is a right turn, and that goes all the way down to Memorial Park and terminates there, which is not at the beach, which was one of the requirements of this particular phase of the whole bike path. The third one went down the same way as the first one to Caswell Avenue, which is where Pier Liquors and the library are, and it turned right and came down to Kingstown Road, and then terminated also at Memorial Square. Again, not technically at the beach. So I've thought about this a lot. I've been looking at it. I've been, since the first time I saw this. I've driven down Narragansett Avenue many times just to see what, if there was some logical way to do this. And I just think it's a dangerous way to go, and I just think it doesn't meet the sort of rationale for having the bike path in the first place, which was to have a scenic way for people to ride bikes around South County. And the last piece of that also is that ultimately it's supposed to connect up with a bike route on Boston Neck Road that goes all the way to Wickford. So I came up with an alternative, which some people probably will not be thrilled with, but I think it's worth taking a look at and considering. So, Dan, you might want to just go to the next one. Yeah. So up in the left-hand corner, right up in here, I can't see it, right here, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong, anybody? Where the actual bike path ends is right over here. And so the idea, or it's actually right before that green line. And the green line would actually become part of the bike path that goes along the north end of the community center, and that would have to be, built up. It comes down to an area where the old original Canachet Farms Trail began, which is right over here. And the idea is to take that route and go a little bit farther along so that you can, right in here is where there's a Parks and Rec area, there's a garage there, and there's some other space, and there's a lot of sometimes major trucks and stuff in there. So this bypasses that and comes out to this, I believe it has a name, but I don't know what it is. I don't remember what it is, but this service road. And the service road is actually, so first of all, we have a much prettier, way to go. It's a much more scenic route for bike riders. Then riding down this road, you're passing this really lovely little pond, and there's greenery and woods on the other side. And it goes, if you bear to the right, you get to the Little League field and the parking lot and the playground. But there's also a partial path right here that goes all the way to Swarthmore. Okay, right in there. I'm sorry, my hand is like a little shaky. So some of it's more built up than other parts, but it's not very long, and it's not wet. And so, although we would probably, no matter what we do, we're going to have conversations with CRMC, probably DEM, to see if we could do this. There's another alternative if we can't. Then we're going to go up Swarthmore, and I'm sure the most difficult part will be we will go through the Canachet Farms development just straight up to the turn to the South County Museum, and then go from there along the road. If you've been to the South County Museum, if you go to any event, you either park on this grassy area or you park over on the side here. The path would continue along here, along the side, past the stables into Anhoxie Lane. And Anhoxie Lane right now is a grassy kind of dirt road that goes down all the way to the west lot. It's a beautiful view on both sides. It is high, so there's no water involved. And there wouldn't be a tremendous amount of work that would need to be done in terms of the use of the $3 million that we have available. And by the way, the $3 million, I believe we lose that money in 2027, so we really need to do something about it. So this is kind of the part that I think is beautiful. There's space either along the edges up here or along the edges down here to put up a couple of things. We could put up kiosks, or a kiosk, that tells, the end story, the terminus story of the William C. O'Neill bike path, sort of mirroring what you see if you get on the bike path at the train station in Kingston. In addition, it's a really great nexus for so many recreational activities in Narragansett. So you have the bike path, you have the Canachet Farms Trail, you have South County Museum. There's a 5.2-mile walking trail that actually goes around in a circle. Oops, maybe I'll use this. Around in a circle down along the seawall, and then it ends up at the Crooked Brook Path, which is maintained by our land trust here in Narragansett, and then it swings around and ends up at the front end of Canachet Farms Trail, which is up over here, sort of somewhere, and then we'd come right back to the west lot. So there's all those things that are really part of the nature of what Narragansett is in terms of recreation and natural activities, and I think that that's just kind of a great way to sort of either end or start taking a bike ride. I want to say that I walked a lot of this path with Susan Bonanno a week and a half ago. We walked up through the Kenotchett Farms development. We talked about, what would have to happen if we did this in terms of signage and in terms of the road. There are 2 areas in the bike path now that are on surface roads. One of them is in Wakefield, the road that goes along the side of the post office, where there's absolutely no change to the road at all. There's nothing on the road. There's, I think, 2 signs that indicate that the direction of the bike path. The other is in a more urban area in Peacedale. And again, the roads are not marked particularly, although there is some signage. So in my mind, the signage could be next to nothing. You could literally put a bike path route sign before you go into Kenotchett Farms development and do nothing to the road at all, and then just where that sign is for the South County Museum, add another, just a directional that says to take the left into, going towards the South County Museum. Whatever we would do as far as when we get to the museum would be a little bit, probably signed a little bit better, and so I think the road might be a little bit, but it's a gorgeous walk, ride, whatever. When we were in the Kenotchett Farms development, we saw, I think, 1 runner and 2 bicyclists or something, and it was. I didn't get any sense that it would be something that would be disruptive to the enjoyment of the people in that area. There is virtually we'd have no issue as far as parking is concerned. In terms of the kind of parking that would be on Narragansett Avenue. So there's a lot of advantages, and there are a few disadvantages. We do need to know for sure about wetlands. We do need to listen to what some folks who probably want to speak tonight want to say about this, but I think it has some really great features. I don't know what the cost estimate would be at this point, but based on the cost for Phase 3, which was the piece that they did in Narragansett from Mumford Road to the community center, that cost about $700,000, and it included some tremendous movement of trees, et cetera. So it was also several years ago, so we know that everything costs more now than it did then. But that would be what we would have to do as we began the process. So with that,
Thank you.
I'm done.
Did anybody ever come up with that plan before, or is that something new? Because I did look at all the other.
I think there was some discussion. I think a lot of the discussion before was really about how to get through Kenotchett Farms, the recreational area. And it was virtually impossible because of the nature of the land where they wanted to go. They wanted to go along the railroad, whatever that's called. But it's very close to the Narrow River, and it also had, and the rest of Kenotchett has a significant amount of wetlands, so you have to be it would be virtually impossible to do. So down here, it's a little bit clearer, and so I think it has possibilities. There is a potential alternative if we did have a problem with the service road and the path that goes beyond the service road, and that would be to move up towards the top of where Kingstown Road is, and you could actually put a small bike path on the inside of that with a fence on the inside of that to make sure that the playground was safe, et cetera. That would be another opportunity there if we had to do that. Still, one of the things that just really appeals to me is that I ride my bike a lot, and I love scenery, and I don't like necessarily riding in very inhabited areas, so that appealed.
I agree. Any other council members wishing to comment on the presentation that we have?
I just have a question. Jim, during the workshop, it was Deprete Engineering specifically mentioned that they were told not to look at Strathmore. Can you explain why, or who asked them not to?
I'm just going from memory on this. If I recall back in late 19, there was some work sessions, and I believe it was a council meeting as well. The work session was held in this room, and there were residents present, and they expressed concern about overroad routes, but that was it. I'm not sure if they were ever told not to explore them by the council. I don't recall.
because I remember in 2018, 2020, we had a large group of people from Wanda Street, but I don't think anybody from Strathmore. So I just didn't know where that came from.
I know. I reviewed the work session minutes from 2019. There were a couple work sessions, just kind of discussions there, but any other council members? Mr. Ferrandi?
I'd like to speak to the, thank you, Eva. One of the things I brought up last time was, you know, a bike path is a bike path, but when it gets on a road, it's, you know, it's a bike path, but it stops becoming a bike path in a way. You know, if it's in a wooded area and all that, so maybe one alternative is, I'm not sure, what is it, $3 million left? Maybe we could see if there's a way of going with that wooded bridge to a certain level into the better area there, into the woods, wooded area, close to where they could, you know, have a terminus, go as far as we could go in the best arable possibilities without having to go through the main roads or a neighborhood, and end it there with a terminus, and then the rest would be a walk, you know, connecting to the Canachet trail down to the beach where the parking lot is. I mean, we do park vehicles on the west lot there, so, you know, that's my opinion. To maybe try to look at something like that. It might not get you that far, but maybe that's one alternative as opposed to, you know, what I'm looking at as far as taking up one whole side of a street, you know, and I even asked the question, where can we look at this to see if that's going on now? I'm sure there's areas, but they were very vague on what they could do with that. And we're going to lose all the parking. So it's like, you know, the best place would be in that wooded area, but, you know, we're having a hard time getting it there or getting it arable enough to get it around towards the beach. So can we use the money to get as close as we can get? You'd still have a wooded area. You know, maybe you could connect to the Canachet trails also. It's not necessarily completely all the way with a bike, but we just don't have a good wooded area where we can just, you know, I've been on the one up to URI, and it's, there's a few spots where it goes over some bridges. But, you know, only talking a little short space. So, I mean, I don't know if they looked at that. You know, maybe it is all wet in that area. I do like the air at least coming around the back a little bit that Deb said, but, you know, just to go on Kingstown Road or any of those other main roads with a designated spot with everything, I mean, to do it, you'd have to do it right, and that's what it is for a bike path. You need all those lanes one way, the other, but we're going to be losing all that parking. So we're limited in what we can do outside of, you know, connecting it to crossing Kingstown Road somewhere on the other side and going it way around the other side. So, you know, is the goal to get it right to the beach as important no matter what we do, or is the goal just to get some bike paths that we can use down to a closer area somewhere?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was thought of, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Right, so the presentation was on the 30th, so I would be interested to hear as well, just so we could get some consensus from those three options, whether, you know, somebody preferred one over the other or none at all. I think Deb said none. So, yeah, so that's what we're really trying to assess, because we will need to determine next steps. Because if the consensus here is that those three options we don't feel are viable or the best options to pursue, like the bike path as we envision it or see it, then we would have to move on and continue maybe, you know, getting the engineering firm to explore other options. Because when I was looking at the work sessions from 2019, when a lot of this was being discussed, there were some other options, and those weren't brought forward to us and with the study. Additionally, we still don't have the costs associated with those three options. Is that correct, Mr. Tierney? We don't have those finalized?
Yes, I reached out to Dupree again on Thursday, going back and forth. They are preparing the final report. What they're going to do is, it's going to be a comprehensive summary document, and the three reports will be appendices in the report, and that will be included, the costs of each of those options.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you. So we don't have those costs either. So just for the sake of time, if any other council members wish to comment on whether they like those options or want to try to find other alternatives, I would like to hear about that.
So I'm not thrilled with the options. 2 years in the making, we waited for the report, and I got to be honest, Dupree is a good company, but I was disappointed basically in the presentation as far as alternatives, because when Deb and I walked, we actually thought of a more beautiful route, and we're not even engineers, but so I was kind of disappointed. It took a long time. It wasn't really interesting and exciting. When I asked the question, were there any other options, they sort of said no. So I think, like I've heard on the council, if we're going to lose that kind of parking going down main streets, then it's not worth it. When we were looking at the wetlands, it was like 8 million. We knew we couldn't go that far in Conatchett Farms, but I think having a hybrid, an idea of a scenic route, if we can. I mean, we know we have to be on the roads at times, but if we can take that turn and, maybe even just cut through a little bit of Conatchett and then get down to Anahoxie and dump in, I think that's a beautiful, we walked it, I think it's beautiful. I think it could probably make the 3 million or under. And I just don't see, I have a bike too, but I just don't see like going down Narragansett Ave or any other main drag where there's cars and people backing out. I just don't think that would be enjoyable. And I can clearly remember the residents, one of the things that they wanted in 2019 was if it could be off-road, any opportunity. And I was kind of disappointed because a lot of it is on-road. And so, we did the study, and I'm glad we finally pushed to have it, but I think we could do better than what we're reading.
Yeah, I agree. The 3 paths, I think that for whatever reason, Dupree thought they should not look at this route. So I don't know why they thought that, but they put no thought into it. So I concur that we can't afford to lose parking spots in the pier. We just can't. I would like that neighborhood to be able to see this route and get their thoughts from this. And maybe there is a way, as Steve was suggesting, that perhaps we could go behind the houses and not interfere with their roads and taking up space on their roads. I think that they really need a chance to be able to come in and talk with us about their thoughts about having a path go through. Because we heard quite clearly from Wanda Street that they did not want that. So I would expect we're going to get the same. So I agree with you, Eva. I think that we need to look further into this and find a better way.
Okay, so I think that's the consensus is we do have funding to do this, so we can re-engage, I guess we could use that term. Mr. Tierney, what do you need anything from us at this point, or is any formal actions, not tonight, but going forward at the next council meeting?
If the council can come maybe perhaps to a consensus, then I can contact Dupree again and say that some other alternatives came up, and there is some funding still left in that account, and to see if they could consider those.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I also don't want to lose all this parking. I'm just envisioning driving on that main road, and I've done. I did the MS 150 one time, and it was like going along the main road, and it was really, it was not fun. And then also the people who drive by aren't very road friendly, and it's not very safe.
Add to that tourists that have no idea where they are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we do have our town council meeting at 7, so we do have time. I know there's a lot of interested parties here that came out. A lot of supporters of the bike path. If anyone would like to kind of comment on the last study that we had presented, and if anyone has any alternative ideas that we can kind of present, or just have the engineering firm come up with and eventually present. Sorry. You can come up to the. I'm sorry. You can come up to the. That mic's on, right? Yeah. So you can just come up and speak. They're just. Yeah, just state your name and address.
Hi, Don Frederick. I live on Strathmore Street in Conatchett Farms. And I think there's some givens. I don't think anybody in particular wants a bike path to go through the neighborhood. I think a bike path offers an awful lot of great things. So I'm not pro, I'm not con either way. But I just want to put some factors on the table here. And I did have the opportunity to send you folks an alternative plan that I came up with. And the idea of the 87 parking spot loss from the Dupree study struck me right away, and I said, there's no way that anybody's going to go for that because there's just too many spots. So one of the things I had proposed in the communication I sent to you folks was to have the bike path cross Kingston Road, just as it crosses Main Street in downtown Wakefield, near Brickley's there. Have it cross, go up Prospect Street, which is a relatively, not a heavily trafficked road. It didn't go through the chicken coop area, if you know where I am now, in the plant science area behind the high school. It would then pick up the existing bike path that is already there. So I walked that area myself, and I noted that the entire north side, the entire south side of Central, starting right wherever the side of the building is here, is no parking from here all the way to the wall. So if we were considering the Depreet study, which presents the concept of going down Kingston Road and losing 87 spots, the same issue there, people backing out of the driveways, some cross streets. The bottom line is that going down Central Avenue, you would have ample room for a bike path going down there in 2 lanes of travel, which are already designated as no parking. You could then easily turn down Boone Street, and half the side of Boone Street is also no parking, and could traverse across in front of the fire station, Caswell Street, and onto the beach. And I think that would go through relatively few neighborhoods given, but as I discussed in the memo to you folks, is that it would allow people to see the wonderful historic districts. Another thing that Councilwoman pointed out tonight, it's very pretty and very nice, but it might be an option. And I don't think anybody would be particularly upset with that. I don't speak for the people who live on Prospect Street. I don't know how they would react to that. But the bottom line is that I think it would provide a safe route. If you see the green arrow or the green mark on the route over there, and with a baseball field, it would go across Prospect Street, right, kind of like in that right field there of the Little League field. So that would be an opportunity there to alleviate a lot of things. The other thing that I mentioned to a couple of folks on the council is that the fine for parking in a bike lane is $60 per offense. And I know we've got some thoughts that we would not do any lineage in Conatra Farms. We wouldn't do any postage signs or anything like that lane of share a road with a rider, type of thing. But the bottom line is that that would in itself would create a hardship if we have to put lanes through any development, because we have a pool, and on Sunday afternoons my grandkids tend to like the grandfather more than most, but so we have lots and lots of people come. So I think that's something we ought to take a look at. Maybe Depreet could follow through on it. I don't know, but just a thought. There are a lot of city planners who can react to that in a better way than what I can. But am I out of time?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. So that's the thought that I had. And I hope that you folks receive that communication. And it's just an idea. But rather than get into I remember well the conflict of going up Wanda Street and down Othmont Street the other way, that whole conflict there. That was a hot and heated debate, and I'm not so sure that we need to go through all that and take a lot of time. If what I'm proposing works for everybody, and again, I am a cyclist myself, and I love doing that, and I think it would provide a lot of opportunities for folks. Just my thought.
Thank you
Thank you.
for
Take care.
that. Mr. Lynch.
So Dennis Lynch, 22 Central Street. I don't want to step on Don's idea immediately, although as a Central Street resident, certainly something you'd look at, but you do sort of just exit in very, very busy Boone Street and a whole bunch of sort of crazy driving in the summertime. But if it's worth examining, it's worth examining. Just wanted to point out, I mean, Deb's recommendation here is the natural bike path. That's the bike path that myself and a lot of people use to get down to the beach. So you come off the bike path, you go behind the community center, behind the ball field. You do have to go out on Kingston Road for a little bit here. Her plan would have you not having to do that, and then on through the neighborhoods and down to the beach. So it's sort of the natural way that people have been going. So I think it's worth examining. On a related point to the bike path, though, and it kind of back to what Don was talking about on Prospect. Prospect is just the short street that connects you to the beautiful bike path that the town has built all around the schools. And it's isolated now. That's a very dangerous crossing at Prospect to across Kingston there. And any other busy crossing on the bike path usually has, a button stop with stoplights Yeah, certainly on Kingston Road in Wakefield, and then again in Main Street. And in that particular crossing, the way the cars come around the curve, it's hard to pick up an automobile and hard for them to pick you up, even if you have a flag in your hand on your bike trying to get across that street. So I think as under the heading of safety, it would be really valuable to look at some enhanced way of controlling or stopping traffic, because that's, and I'm thinking perhaps a lot of people over in the Mumford, I mean, if those kids are riding their bikes over to get to the middle school or to the high school, that is not a very safe crossing for them there. So I would suggest that you look at that as part of your plan for the bike path from this segment going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure,
I just,
Counselor.
thank you, Dennis, because I did have that in my notes, I just didn't read it. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I worry tremendously about that spot all the time, you know, especially if some kid tries to, I mean, I don't think a crosswalk with a yellow, with an orange flag is safe enough for anybody at that spot.
Okay, any other takers out there that would like to speak? Ms. Kelly? No, I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly's already come up, she's already, I'll get you next, Doctor. Yeah, sorry.
Lori Kelly, 25 Wildfield Farm Road. Deb, I love your idea. I do walk up in that area with a dog. I think that street Strathmore going up there, I mean, I'm sure people do use it more in the summer and there's parking on the street, but it seems wide, it's not heavily traveled, and I would be concerned about people biking down through the center of town when, you know, people are unaware of where the stop signs are, et cetera. So I definitely think that's worth doing. And then coming down, I've done that exact walk down Ann Hoxie Lane. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Angel.
There's, just as you come in through the wall, it takes a jog. If you can see it, it takes like almost a 45-degree turn. So if you're coming in, you don't see somebody coming at you. When you're coming out, you don't see very well people coming in at you. And that's automobiles. So there are times when people are walking, living there, the people that live in that neighborhood realize that as you're coming in there, there's no stop sign. In fact, as you're coming in from the street, there's a stop sign out, but none in. People come through pretty fast. And more than once, I've had close calls coming out because they come in so fast, they don't see you really well. And it's not necessarily the wall, it's the way the road is. The road takes that sharp turn. And especially in evening and early morning when it's dusk and dawn, it's even more difficult to see people walking their dogs. And I can imagine with bicycles. I think it's a little bit dangerous, and we should be thinking about, is there any way you could get from the bike path through the woods to Strathmore? That's not a possibility?
It's pretty darn wet.
That's wetlands, right?
Problem there is it's very wet, and DEM and CRMC would have something to say about that. There has been, you know, some analysis over the years of a whole, that basically, I think, that virtual whole swath, and it would be phenomenally expensive to try and do something. You'd have to, like, basically build a bridge, and that's, you know, that's not something that we're ever going to have the money for.
They
So,
did look at that
yeah,
area.
yeah.
Soaked.
So, I mean, that would have been the most perfect thing, but it has been discussed, it has been examined, and unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Okay, Dr. Lancelot, so of course we'd have the engineers like looking at it and the options in the 45. So it's just, it was just a thought, so
Yeah,
for that.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I just considering that there's got to be some better signage, that it is a bike path and beware.
Yeah.
Because as you're coming in, and I mean, realistically, you're supposed to go 25 miles an hour. On the
Yeah,
way
we
in,
know.
very few people go 25 miles an hour.
Anywhere in this town.
And frequently, if I'm on the road walking, I'm always flagging
Yeah.
people down, slow down, because they do come by pretty
It's
fast.
a good point, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friday? Oops.
Good evening, Rupert Friday, 113 Montauk Road. When I worked in Maryland, I did a little bit of work on transportation planning and bike paths. And I guess I'd like to make a couple points. One is that it's really an economic development opportunity for the town. We found putting bike paths into areas in Western Maryland, really, they then became a destination for bicyclists. And I think this trail is already a destination for families and bicyclists. So I think extending it into town really would have a huge benefit. That said, I think it's important that families feel safe along it, and I think the route recommended by the consultants, I don't think they would feel safe. I don't think families with young children would feel safe. My wife likes to bicycle, but she won't bicycle on roads that have a lot of traffic. She'll bicycle on neighborhood streets. And I think so I was thinking about the route before seeing the map prepared by Councilwoman Kopech, and my feeling is from a transportation planning perspective, I think that's the route that makes sense. It's sort of the natural route, as Mr. Lynch said. I think that's a route that just sort of sells itself. And the other thing I think it would do is it would connect more people with the South County Museum. So I think it would have that benefit. It would sort of increase the visibility of South County Museum and increase its use. And I think it would also provide a route to the beach so that people don't have to park at the beach. So I think it provides those benefits and a safe route for children with families. So independently, I would have drawn a similar line. So I really support that.
Thank you, Mr. Friday. Mr. Smith, I saw your hand up earlier. Sure.
Randy Fixman, 51 Winterberry Road, former member of the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee and also a practicing transportation planner. Definitely agree with the last speaker about the economic development opportunities with the bike path and bringing more people to the pier area, particularly because you will never build enough parking to meet demand. The best way to get people here is by walking and biking. I'd encourage you again to look at Wanda Street. I believe the Ride-Out study from a few years ago really over-engineered what needs to happen there. Much like Councilwoman Kopech's alternative, which I also like, Wanda Street doesn't need anything but a couple signs. So you could potentially do it there and save all of the parking on Kingstown Road. Last thing too is the reason the consultants did not look at Wanda, Offmore, or Strathmore streets was because it was specifically excluded from the town's scope of work.
Thank you. Oh, hold on.
Before Dave speaks, I just want to say he was actually the creator of that map, and I appreciate it immensely. We had another map that was created also by the Community Planning Department, and I appreciate their help.
I'm David Smith, live on 24 Castle Road in Narragansett. My wife Rosemary and I have been advocates for the completion of the bike path since the last century. Initially, we were trying to get a path up the Seaview Railroad and arc around to the high ground in Conatchett Farm, come down through. And for years, we've been pushing that. But sea level rise, the wetlands, the vernal pools that are in there, it's just impossible. It would never get, it would never be permitted. And of course, the Department of Transportation would say, oh, there's a good excuse now to build a bike path. So given that, and it was my first disappointment with the study, is that they went back and looked again at the wetlands and even decided to look at going over the trails. well, the trails are assets of the town and should not be compromised. So anyway, that was, the second disappointment was that they didn't look at anything other than Narragansett Avenue, Kingstown Road. The recommended path coming down Kingstown Road, that is a bike route designated by the state of Rhode Island, and is not well marked at all. There are any number of intrepid, experienced bicyclists who use that with no problem. But if you, but the idea of putting in the two-way bike lane in there was to make it safer for families. It just doesn't work. Bidirectional lanes are very successfully used in Greater Boston, in downtown Providence, on Empire Street, and Broad Street, with on-street parking, and there are buses and every other thing. But the streets are big enough, and there aren't driveways where people are backing out. So that would make putting a bidirectional lane on Kingstown Road would make it more dangerous. All right. I think going through Canachet Farm is a development, and through South County Museum, is the safest route. The other thing is, if you configure this, there are any number of bicyclists who will stop and go down Wanda. And that's a perfectly safe street. Currently, people heading away from the beach will use Wanda because they don't want to go out on Narragansett Avenue and get doored. So anyway, the one thing when Wanda and Othmar were proposed, I agree with Randy, it was over-engineered and you could very easily get down Wanda Street, reducing the speed limit and making it not no-through traffic. The other thing that I like the path about going through Canachet Farm, but it doesn't take care of a mess that is the portion of Narragansett Avenue that goes along Lake Canachet. That is really, in the summertime, there are people walking to the beach in the middle of traffic, there are bicycles, there is two-way traffic, there's people parking, there are people selling stuff on it. That should be addressed no matter what no matter what plan you use. So anyway, my recommendation is go forward with the path through Canachet Farm and to the South County Museum, but also attend to crossing to Kingstown Road to get to the Safe Routes to School path, signage on Kingstown Road and Narragansett Avenue, share the road, I'll even put up with sharrows, and do something about that strip of Narragansett Avenue where people are walking in the middle of the street by necessity because there's no sidewalk there, there's no things. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Mr. Friday had his hand up for maybe
I forgot one point that I wanted to make earlier. My experience on bicycle trails in Maryland is everywhere where we planned them, and a lot of them were rail-to-trail kind of conversions, the neighbors, when they were being planned, were opposed to them, inevitably. After they were built, the opposite happened. People started using them as a promotion for selling their house, and very rarely were the problems that everybody was saying, what's going to happen when the bike path is put through here. So it's just, it was universally the situation no matter where the bike path was planned. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we came with, I'm sorry? Yeah, sure. Let's double do. Oh, yeah, we're gonna.
We don't seem to have much trouble selling housing properties in there, but one of the issues that we have also, we do have covenants in our association, so we have restrictions on signage, we have restrictions on what we can do and present our property and so forth and so on. And those covenants are in fact registered with the town of Narragansett, and we have abided by those for 25 years, and we would hope that the town would recognize that in terms of, I think, signs painted on the street, bike lanes on the street would be a major issue for our development. And I think an excessive number of signs that share the road with a rider would be a major issue for our development, and people would have a real hard time with that. So if it was a fairly benign thing, something that we might be able to get to fly, but there's some considerations there. So thank you.
Thank you. One last speaker, because we have a 7 o'clock meeting, and I just have to wrap up.
Hi, my name is Tim Flaherty, 59 Conacha Way. And just looking at that map, it's obvious with Wanda and Othmar, there's obviously a direct path to the road. If you look at that map, that's the old adage, what's a camel? A camel is a horse created by a committee. So I know people talk about scenery and things like that, but there's also a very utilitarian approach to bike paths, and you're trying to get people to use the bike path to eliminate cars. So when you say you lose 87 parking spaces, the idea behind creating a bike path is to eliminate cars in Narragansett. So I've heard anecdotal things about people loving the bike path once it's there. My perspective, again, I've lived around, I've had a house here for 20 years, but I've been traveling around a little bit. There's bike paths everywhere. There's bike paths downtown Boston. There's a bike path on Mass Ave in Cambridge. There's a bike path in, Com Ave in Boston. We used to live in Scottsdale. There were bike paths everywhere. There are no bike paths through a small community neighborhood. The bike paths are on the main roads everywhere in this country. So I understand about the scenery thing, but there's a utilitarian aspect of it as well. So I think, yes, there are safety issues on Narragansett. Obviously, Wanda, Othmar make the most sense. I wasn't around here when those discussions took place, but to move it from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, which is far less attractive, doesn't make much sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to adjourn shortly, but I just want to this meeting was for discussing the three options that we were presented with. I don't think any of us here like any of those options, so what we're going to do is move forward. We're going to try to get other options, some of the ones that were expressed today, and so we will contact the engineering firm and try to do that. This is not the last time. I'm sure we'll be talking about the bike study. I don't foresee something of the nature that we're asking for taking too much of a long time. I know time is of the essence. We want to get this finalized and completed. I think it's important. So, Mr. Tierney, do you think what's a reasonable turnaround, just so that we kind of have? I mean, I know you don't have your glass.
I would have to check with Dupree.
Yeah.
I've sent them emails as recent as Thursday
Okay.
and today.
But they have, but some of these options were previously discussed, so it's nothing that's really new to them. I think this path is, so we'll just look into that. So that's where we're going to go from here, and we will definitely be keeping all those interested in letting everybody know the progress. So we'll keep everyone updated. So this time, we do have a 7 o'clock meeting, so we're just going to need to adjourn so that we can disassemble this setting down here. So I will adjourn this meeting. Good night, everyone, and thank you for everyone's input.